Addiction never affects just the addict. It affects all of us. Recovering from addiction and alcoholism is also a life-changing battle for families dealing with a loved one's addiction. Numerous programs support addicts as they reclaim their lives, while their families face their own challenges without the same guidance. You're listening to Voices InCourage with KL Wells, where we transform the lives of the families and loved ones of addicts and alcoholics from surviving to thriving in the midst of chaos. Tune in as we highlight vulnerable stories of families who have addicted relatives and friends and learn how they have dealt with the challenges of isolation, desperation, and shame. If you are seeking ways to live your best life, then we welcome you into this safe space. Be a part of change today with your host, KL Wells.
Well, welcome back to Voices InCourage with KL Wells. And today we have somebody who I met just last week through a mutual friend of ours that we both adore. And we just had a really delightful, profound conversation about things that really have touched our lives and how we have learned to navigate and who we've become in the process of all the things that we've stepped in to do our work. And we have these overlapping stories a little bit. And we also, not only in terms of trauma around addiction, but also in terms of our personal journeys to navigate the trauma and how to, I think for me, I think about it in terms of getting back to my peace and calm. And so welcome, Robin Detmer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Glad to be here, Kale.
You're welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you. So she is a physical therapist, a body worker, a shamanic medicine mesa carrier. Did I get that right?
Yes.
All right. And we have certainly an overlap in the whole shamanic work and vision quests and journeys that we've done along those lines. Hers looks a little different than mine, but it's all in the same spirit work. And then her dad had issues with addiction. And so she has had a big life in such a short period of time. So I think it's remarkable. Yeah. And so Belize is part of the story. And her mom and her sister wrote a book called The Open Book, which I have not completely finished yet, but it's really well done. I really love the way you have woven your mom's writing, your writing, and your sister's writing in it. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in the midst of all of this also. And married, 3 kids, so big life, and doing the work and helping others. So welcome again.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It was really fun to meet you last week, and we did have so many parallels. We had such fun just going, what? Me too. That was great.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So if you would step back a little bit into Belize and your dad's addiction and how that impacted you, and then, kind of your journey to thriving.
All right. Yeah, so I grew up in Belize, Central America, in the jungle where my parents kind of homesteaded for 14 years. I was born there and stayed there until I was 7.5. And my dad was always an addict. We found out later that he had some mental health issues, that he was probably self-medicating with alcohol and drugs. But when we were in Belize, he was quite sober most of the time because we lived in the jungle and there was no access to really anything. So he worked hard and he was a great dad, very kind and caring, didn't pass on any of the abuse he had suffered as a child onto us, which I'm forever grateful for. And really just when we went to town, he would get very drunk, at the local bar, but town was it was a big deal to get to any town. And so, so for the time in Belize, I didn't, I was just like a normal childhood with a dad who grew pot, which was illegal, but didn't really phase me, and got drunk when he could. Um, and then when we moved up to the United States to California, he, had more access to alcohol. So he started being gone a lot more, kind of being absent a lot of nights, not keeping jobs. He was in construction. And so he would bid jobs and then kind of not show up. And
Mm,
things sort of started spiraling. He also, at that time, coming out of Belize, he had gotten really into smuggling drugs as well, which is the whole story is in the book. And it was sort of a story that my sister and I knew pieces of and shadows of, but everybody sort of said, no, no, I don't think that's quite right. And then we kind of got more of the story. We're like, oh, yes, our memories are more true than we realized. And then
mm,
we got my dad's kind of more full story about it. So that was fascinating. So he got pretty into um, smuggling in kind of a big way.
mhm,
And he was kind of the big man for a while. He felt on top of the world because he's getting all this cash and coming home with suitcases of money. And then he got caught on a run and he sort of spiraled after that. I think he had sort of a mental break and just fell into depression.
mm, mm,
And so that's when it really got hard for me and I think my sister. That was when I was finishing middle school. Well, it was during middle school, really, that like at the
mm,
beginning of middle school when he got busted and then he just spiraled. And so that whole kind of 11, 12, 13 time for me was just very much like chaotic with him really not doing well, my
mhm,
mom trying to make it work. And that was after he'd gotten busted. And so I think that was just really kind of ruined him. So after that, my parents got divorced and he was just absent for a very long time.
mhm.
And, you know,
Did he go to jail?
he did not go to jail. He paid off a lot of very high up people
Mhm.
to not go to jail.
Okay.
A lot of the people he was with did,
Mhm.
but yeah,
Okay.
he didn't. He was held and then he got released.
Mhm.
So, and then he was very paranoid. He always thought they were tracing our phones. He wouldn't let us, he'd use pay
Mhm.
phones and he would think everyone was following us and he'd tell us not to talk to people about his name and things like that.
Sure.
Yeah. So,
And so how were I mean, as an 11, 12, 13-year-old, how was that?
well, it was hard. I mean, I had really loved my dad and been quite close to him and always just really wanted to be with him. But then when he started disappearing, I think I just put up a lot of guarding around myself and I really went into
Mm.
this protective, I don't even care about him anyways, and it doesn't even matter, and I don't need a dad sort of coping
Mhm.
package. And
Yeah.
so for a very long time, I was in that place until actually writing the book. I realized how close I really was to him and how much that had
Mm.
hurt. But it
Mhm.
took 30, 30 years
Right.
to
Okay.
say, "Oh, wow, like, that was just coping that I said I didn't care." I did care.
Right. Mhm. Yeah.
So, I was in the, I had suffered some sexual abuse in Belize, not by my father, but someone else, and I think my whole coping from all of that was just very much, perfectionism and, like, do all the right things and look like a really put together good girl, and
Sure.
I really did that well. So, I just did that through middle school and through high school and into college, and I just ignored this whole, like, what I considered the very, like, broken part of my family, like, my whole dad situation. I was just like, I just don't even worry about that. I just
Mhm.
put that out of
Mhm.
my mind.
Mhm.
Um, but it was always, through college, he was homeless for quite a while, then he was in rehab because my aunt took him there, and he would try to reach out. So I had a little bit of contact with him. He tried to do the 12 steps, but really didn't. Um, he was homeless again. I mean, it was just a very up and down situation. And then I just cut off ties for quite a number of years. When I got out of college and started having a family, I just really wanted to protect my family from him and his life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think there are certainly things out of that story that everybody who's listening to this can relate to. The dysfunction, the figuring out, picking how do we choose to cope with it when we're a kid growing up, and and I think kind of putting it in a box and putting it on a shelf. And then I was the oldest also in my family, so being the good girl, I can completely relate to that, and doing all the right things, to get by, so to speak, and the facade of that, and then sooner or later the facade kind of catches up with us.
Hmm. Yep,
Hmm.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to a point where I was very numb and my whole life felt very fake and very numb.
Mhm.
I write in the book that I felt like I was an actor in my own movie and I was very good
Wow.
at being a director, but I didn't feel any of it.
Hmm.
The highs and the
Hmm.
lows. I was just very flat. And that was very acceptable in my family. We
Hmm.
were raised by a lot of women who were very we call it toxic positivity now, but at the time it was just optimism.
Right.
Um,
Oh
so,
God.
it was just
Hmm.
like, yeah, just smile. Like, we're fine. Everything's great. Nothing was talked about ever that was hard. And so I was just kind of like,
Mm.
everything's wonderful. Why would you ask?
Yeah.
I had a teacher that kind of tried to delve into it a little bit with me in high school because I was in my writing, I was able to share a little bit more, uh,
Okay.
about how things really were. And I was able to express a little bit of the darker side. And so
Hmm.
I had a teacher for my AP English or something, and he kind of called me in and tried to get me to open up a
Hmm.
little, and I was just like, "No, I'm fine. Why?" And, okay, thanks for checking. Bye. Just
Sure.
very like smile on. So that was just my way, but yeah, I definitely felt flat, and
Hmm.
at a certain point that would became not okay, but it took quite a
Yeah.
long time.
And so what was the point? Because I'm imagining it felt like you went from flat, and at some point it just kind of began to break.
Yeah, it started breaking in college because I got physically very sick. Um, and
Okay.
think I was eating toxic food. I was sort of stuffing myself with, like, trying to fill the emptiness with
Mhm,
sort of food and
mhm,
drinking
mhm,
too much and not sleeping and taking on too much and working too many jobs. And also, it was just too much
mm,
and
mhm,
just really beating
mhm.
myself up. And my body finally said, "Hello." And I got chronic bronchitis for a very long time that I couldn't get rid of, and some other
Mm,
things that just all kind of hit me at once.
mhm,
And I suddenly kind of went, "Oh." I didn't really realize at that point I hadn't studied, the body
mhm,
like I have now in health, but I suddenly realized that, like, my body was kind of keeping track of all of this
mhm,
and it wasn't okay anymore, that I had to sort of look at it. So I went into some talk therapy in
mhm,
college and started trying to be a little bit more honest about what had happened to me
mhm,
and what that meant.
mhm,
Yeah. But
mhm,
I don't know, talk therapy didn't do as much for me as some of the later things that I did, the more somatic therapy and breath work and the shamanic transformational journey. And those things really are the things that peeled off layers of the onion to where I could actually soften and feel alive again. I think talk therapy
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I messed up. Well, it's good to admit. Okay, back to life, each week.
Right, 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 right. Okay, so I'm wondering at the same time, I certainly absolutely want to touch on the body work and the shamanic work and so on and so forth. And how did you get to physical therapy?
So I was a swimmer and I hurt my shoulder and I went to physical therapy in high school. And I
Okay.
was like, ooh, this seems kind of cool. Like, this isn't just
Uh-huh.
a sit at your desk job. It's kind of neat. And you're helping people and whatever. And then after my mom and dad separated, and my mom needed to work more. So she got a full time job as a physical therapy aide. And she was already a massage therapist. So that was kind of in my blood. And
Mm,
then she went back to school actually when I was in high school and became an acupuncturist as well. So she got
mm,
sort of the whole package of
mm,
healing things.
mhm,
And so I don't know, I spent a lot of time in the office with her, and then I was interested. Out of high school, I planned to go straight to a program for physical therapy. That was what I wanted to do right away. And
mhm.
then I got really scared. I was 17, I graduated, and I had early admission, to Puget Sound, and I panicked. I really just was like, I can't do it. I can't leave. So instead, I didn't do that, and I did a couple years of City College, and then transferred to UC San Diego, and I decided I was going to be a writer, and I did
Mhm,
this whole circuitous route, and many years later, I came back and said I kept doing all these tests at the career center, and it was like, "You should be a physical therapist, a counselor, or like a priest." I'm going, "Okay." Some kind of a helping it was just over and over.
mhm,
Okay.
mhm,
So
mhm,
I said, "All right." And I worked and in the end, I worked with a really amazing therapist, a manual therapist in Los Angeles that really inspired me because
mhm.
I had done some work for people that didn't inspire me, and that's kinda why I got disillusioned and decided to be a writer.
Oh,
I said, "You know what? This is
mhm,
they just e-stim and ice and just leaving people on the table, and it just didn't feel like the
mhm,
therapy I wanted to do." But then I
mhm,
worked with someone who was just really incredible, and I
mm,
said, "Okay, that's the kind of therapist I wanna be, really present and manual and,
mhm,
more holistic."
mhm.
So
Yeah.
then I went to grad school, and, so in the end, it took me 8.5 years when it could have taken me 4, but that's okay. If I got
Yeah,
there.
it's just all part of figuring it out,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I love that it's there's a weaving of kind of your illness in terms of the body keeps the score.
Yep.
And then, PT and body work and all the things. So,
Mhm.
do
Yep.
you hmm, do you kind of identify kind of the breaking moment where you got cracked wide open and um, you just could no longer deny that the work really needed to be done for you to feel? Um,
Well, I had a bunch of moments where I said the work needs to be done, and then I would do a little and back off, right? I
mhm,
would say the point at which I really started doing the work that worked, that
mhm,
brought me to where I am now, where I feel incredibly like on a very good healing journey and really thriving and doing well internally,
mhm,
is I had a forgiveness moment. And that was way after college. It was after I'd even had two kiddos. I got married, I had two kids, and I was still very triggered by all the things. And I really had one of those moments. My heart was just feeling very closed and like a little walnut in my heart, just
mhm,
hard, all the time.
mhm,
And I thought, what is wrong with me? My life is really good. Like, if you
mhm,
look at my life, it's incredible. Like, I married an
mhm,
amazing man. I had two great kids. I got a house, like I did school. What is wrong with me? And I just felt
mhm,
very flat still and broken and
mhm,
hard. And so I kept saying I would go to church with my kids, and I kept saying, "Please soften my hardened heart. Please soften my hardened heart," over and over and over, just saying that because I was just sitting there angry in church, basically.
yeah,
And one day, I mean, it just hit me. I didn't even really necessarily at that point believe in like God or spirit, or I
mhm,
was just like, I don't know. We'll just sit here and say this and see what happens. And all of a
yeah,
sudden, one day, this sun just hit me through the windows, and I just melted and I started sobbing. And I really just felt my heart soften. And I just thought, I forgive myself. I forgive my dad. I forgive my abusers. I forgive my mom. I forgive everything. And it was like I lost 30 years. I just suddenly felt young and light and like amazingly open, and at that point, it was like my heart softened and then I could do the work. So
mhm.
I don't know, it was really that moment, I think, but there were a lot of moments before that when I said, "Wow, I should really do more therapy," but I wasn't
Yeah,
really able to until I felt vulnerable or soft enough to
yeah,
enter into it. It took a long
right.
time,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that
Well,
was in the last decade.
what I yeah, and what I love about that is, which I think is true for this is my story, is that I think it's true generally, is that there's a cracking that needs to take place in order to allow us to do the work. And I love the intentionality of, you know, your focus on asking for a softened heart. And so I want our audience to hear that intentionality, to hear that focus on that for you, and then what took place because you stayed in that space until it did emerge.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think surrendering is such an incredible, powerful tool that I
Mhm.
all my life tried to control everything, and hold
Mhm.
on really
Yeah.
tight to the reins because if I didn't,
Yeah.
everything was falling, right? I was the oldest, I was holding it all together.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it worked until it didn't. And then what has really worked in the past 10 years and led to where I feel good is truly just surrendering to
Mhm.
like a higher power, whatever that may be. I use lots of names, for spirit,
Mhm.
light, source, and
Mhm.
Mother Earth, and just surrendering the control. Like we do not have control. I just have realized that over and over now, and just sort
Mhm.
of knees to the floor moments when it's like I give up. Like please take it, and then
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
not in control, and that's okay. Um,
Mhm.
and then I mean, things are just so much smoother. Like the flow, you can get
Right,
into the
right, right.
flow where you're not trying to keep changing your path.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I generally think that most parents in particular that are dealing with kids, or even adult children dealing with addictions, or alcoholism, is we have, I don't know how we have come to this, but we feel like we have control. And we don't have control.
Mhm.
So I think for a lot of people, coming to grips with that notion and that reality and that truth, is that we are not in control.
Yeah.
And so whatever you want to do with it, turn it over to higher power, surrender, so on and so forth. But just to recognize that this is not in your control.
Mhm.
And the only thing that you really can control is you.
Yeah. And I don't want to say too much about it, but I will say that as a parent, I have also gone through some big
Hmm.
things, and had the feeling that I did need to control because, when someone's health is on the line and
Hmm.
you're the
Yep.
parent, you kind
Hmm.
of feel like you better hold the reins at
Hmm.
least as much as you can. Um, and I fought with lots of attempts at control, for a couple of years, and then really just in that case also surrendered and literally fell to my knees. I'm like, I give up. Like it's not mine. It's not my journey. I
Hmm.
can't do this anymore. I can't fix it. And I will say that that shifted things when I just gave up, thinking that it was at all my journey. It
Hmm.
shifted things for my child as well,
Hmm.
and for the whole trajectory of their healing. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I get it as a parent too, that
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
crazy and you do feel like you have to fight the system and everything else. And you have to work and help some, but there's also this sort
Hmm.
of emotional, spiritual release where you realize it's not your journey. You have to
Hmm.
care for yourself and tend to your own journey and then let go a little.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I want to give an exclamation point to is the notion of when we release, they release,
Hmm.
which I think is a really powerful understanding because for most people dealing with their children, um, they're afraid to release. And it seems paradoxical, that if you release, then it releases them also.
Hmm.
And then they're able to do their work on their journey.
Right.
And Yeah.
Yeah, because I think kids are always either trying to care for or please or do something for their parent too, you know? And so
Mhm.
if the parent is really clinging and holding on and trying to control everything, it
Mhm.
just adds an extra burden. It's like they have to do our work and their work, you know, instead of
Right.
like we're
Right.
taking care of us, you take care of you, and
Right.
I love you, support
Mhm.
you, and like I've got me. You don't have to also take care of me. And I think there's a lot of power even if you don't voice that, but I think energetically there's a huge power to that release and saying it's okay, you
Mhm.
just tend to you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I have there's a gentleman that I interviewed a number of months ago, Andy Graham, who his son was dealing with addiction, and Andy asked his son, "What can I do to support you?" And his son simply said, "Just do your work, Dad.
Yeah.
Just do your
Yeah.
work." And I thought, wow, that is wise. Woo.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's pretty profound as to be able to name it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So then speak about your work in terms of the kind of these major kind of stepping stones or milestones for you in terms of opening you up, opening you up, opening you up so you could peel the layers back as you talked about and get more back to the heart of who you really are and that ease and flow and that joy that you had, covered up.
Yeah. Um, well, I found, like I said, talk therapy was in groups and things
Mhm.
didn't do a ton for me.
Mhm.
Helpful, but not transformative. What really helped me, I would say, is embracing the spiritual realm of things through shamanism, shamanic
Mhm.
work. I found it when kind of by accident when I was at a retreat and there was a drumming circle and they wanted us to I saw it and I was like I had to go one of those polls where there's nowhere else I will be at this time. I must be in that drumming circle even though I didn't know what it was going to be. So it was
Mhm.
one of those kind of spirit tugging on me.
Yeah.
Um, and then I went and they said, "You're going to meet a power animal and do this journey." And I was like, "Oh, sure, that's going to happen, you know?" And so I sort of
Right.
sat there like, "Yeah, here we go."
Yeah, yeah.
And, but tried. And I was for a long time, half hours, probably saying, "This isn't working." And then all of a sudden, I did kind of feel myself do the journey and met this cougar, power animal cougar. And it was just
That
the
is
most,
my power animal.
no, really?
Yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's amazing. Oh,
I
cougar's
know.
incredible. That,
I know.
I knew, yeah, we had more in common than we realized.
Woo! Okay, here we go.
Uh,
Yes.
cougar is shaking off, going, yeah.
Ah,
Yeah. So, cougar,
mhm,
what I first experienced was incredible unconditional love. And I think
mhm,
that people, many Christians that have had a sort of born again experience, I think it's what
mhm,
they experience too, sort of this like
mhm,
unconditional love enveloping. And that's what I experienced from cougar. It
mhm,
was like mother love that was so unconditional that I'd never felt before. I mean, my mother was
mhm,
amazing and she loved me, but it
mhm,
wasn't that. It wasn't that
mhm,
amazing warmth. And so it just stayed with me and it was so real. And so then I started after that doing journeys on my own and I got books about, shamanism and I started
mhm,
reading and studying and just doing a lot of journeying.
mhm,
And then fortuitously some patients of mine in my physical therapy practice were shamanic practitioners. And so I sort of, after a few sessions, asked them about that. And
mhm,
they pointed me and told them some things that were happening for me. And they said, "Oh, yeah, you need to meet Berta." So I met my teacher, Berta, who lives in Idaho. And I entered into her year long transformational journey, medicine wheel journey, which is
mhm,
where we built our mesa, which is our 13 medicine stones, and did a lot of work over a year with her. And that was really, as it says in the name, transformational, very transformative. That's really where I learned to really look at everything that had happened to me and all the roles I had put on myself and all of the sort of coping strategies and all the masks and the layers, and really to look at each of those and receive the gifts of what had that given me or grown in me or taught me. and then to release it, right? To like take the gifts in really, truly into my body and into my energetics, and then let go of the density of it and just peeling off layers and layers and all the things, that we learn from culture that are all nonsense and all the, just so many things, right? Just looking at all of it.
Yeah.
Um, so that really was very shifting. And then really learning to connect to my energetic conduit. So learning that I was an energetic being, even, which I knew that I had a connection to something. I felt it, but I didn't know what it was. And I didn't consider myself religious at all. So I just kind of was like, I don't know this, but I learned through that work to really feel that I am an energetic being. We all are, and to connect to spirit and to connect to Mother Earth and to really just be that conduit and shine my light and do the work. And it's, constantly doing the work. I mean, this last month was incredibly, a lot of work came up, more layers. I felt like, wow, okay, August really kicked my butt again, but it's like once you feel that openness, you can't comfortably close again. So
Mhm,
it's, I've done so many different things that I've read, but like Michael Singer's Untethered Soul, I really liked
mhm.
for just letting things pass through me, and a lot of
Right.
Eckhart Tolle's work, and just Pema Chodron, and just a lot of people that I read that really resonate with me,
Mhm,
on how to stay open through
mhm,
crisis or through hard feelings or through layers that are peeling off again, more
mhm,
layers.
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
It's a lifetime journey, I'm sure. I'm 45. I
Mhm,
think it'll keep going
mhm.
on.
Well, I'm 66, and yes, it will.
Yes.
Um, shoot, because I mean, I mean, I the work that you do is you're constantly being woven with everybody that you work with, like as I am. We do different work, but it's the same work,
Mhm,
honestly. It's all spirit work.
mhm,
And every interaction that I have, like what we had last week, neither one of us were the same people when we walked out of that meeting.
mhm,
And so every time I sit down with a client and we have a conversation, which I'm always going to go as deep as I can with them, I'm forever changed.
mhm,
And I know they are. And so we're constantly stepping into the river of transformation,
mhm,
with the work that we do. And we're also, planted in this life, this physical life, and life shows up for us. So we also have these things that show up that give us the opportunity to practice at a higher level.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's true. I appreciate that, every interaction changing us. I mean,
Mhm,
it's true. Every time I have clients, and now I do physical therapy and energetic work, and I'm
mhm,
becoming a practitioner of the shamanic work, in
mhm,
process of that now. And so I'm very much, I have a much bigger medicine bag now. And
mhm.
so the work I do now
Yep.
is much more transformative and much more on a deeper spiritual, emotional level.
Mhm,
Um, and it's definitely true. I mean, every time I enter that realm with someone, just the realm of like vulnerability or
mhm,
spirit, or, I mean, you don't even have to necessarily say you're going there. We can talk about your physical reality, and it's still very profound if we're truthful, and that we
mhm.
really dig. So, yeah, it definitely teaches me every single time too. And
Yeah. And so what I think it's important for the audience to again note is that this is a lifelong journey,
mhm,
and you're never going to arrive at a certain point and go, "Oh, I'm done." you know because life is going to show up and show you that you aren't.
yep,
And that there's more to learn. And so I think of those moments that kind of remind you still have more work to do, as an opportunity to be curious and be full of wonder, and okay, what is it I'm meant to learn out of this experience showing up.
mhm,
And so to embrace the notion that when life actually feels like it's completely falling apart, it's actually really falling together.
for
Um,
sure.
and if you can even begin to kind of play with the idea that that's possible, the more you do, the more you see it happen in your life.
Mhm.
And then you just know that it is.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I always tell people that because it's hard doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Life is just hard
Hmm.
and there's a lot of things that come up. And I really think it's a journey of our soul just learning the lessons that we are meant to learn in this lifetime.
Hmm.
And if we don't sort of open up and notice when we're trying to be taught, it'll just keep coming up. It's
Hmm.
like it will keep beating you on the head eventually until you
Hmm.
sort of go, okay, what am I supposed to be learning here? And so I feel, I think it's a lot more peaceful and a lot more um, internally calm if you don't see every bad thing happening as, "Oh, I'm doing it wrong. My life is bad because I'm
Hmm.
bad." All these stories we tell ourselves are like, "Oh, it looks like everyone else is great because on Instagram their pictures are pretty, so I must be doing it wrong." It's like, no, it's all nonsense. Like, it's hard, it's beautiful, all of it all at once, It's just like
Hmm.
holding all of it and knowing that it's a journey and yeah,
Hmm.
what is it that each moment is trying to show us or teach us?
Right.
It's just a lot more freeing and not you don't have to torture yourself and make yourself suffer as much.
Right, right. Well, I do think this is how I think about it is it I think about like pulling back from your life almost as if you're watching it take place
Mhm,
and with a bigger context. And to understand that you're exactly where you're meant to be, and these are moments that you get to learn and elevate and peel away the things that don't work for you and figure out what are the things that do work for you.
mhm. Yeah, we have a sort of we call it shamanic seeing state that I like to use, which
Hmm.
is sort of this elevating your energy up and sort of watching what's going on or even listening to a conversation from kind of this still waters calm place. And it's a place
Yes.
that I think people
Hmm.
practice when we practice meditation. And it's why that's so powerful is that we practice sort of watching the self and the stories and whatever our brain is doing and being at this higher level where we're just observing and finding things
Hmm.
interesting and curious.
Hmm.
It's really a powerful way to listen as well, especially
Hmm.
if someone else is spinning on a story,
Right.
without diving in and like spinning with them. You kind of
Yes.
step back and you go up to this higher level and just listen and witness and be curious.
Hmm.
Everything shifts in the energy, and I think
Hmm.
it's just really powerful. And then
Hmm.
you don't have to engage at that kind of lower spinning level where
Right.
a lot of people
Exactly.
get stuck.
For sure. Yeah. And for those of you who think we're in woo-woo land, um, I want to actually bring some brain science perspective to the table because this is research and science has shown us that what Robin's really talking about is in our brains, we have a brain stem, which is where we do fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. That's when we're in crisis and stressed. Um, at the top of our head, just to make this simplistic, is the neocortex. And so this is where we're sabotaging ourselves, and this is where we're living in sage.
Mhm,
And when we're up here in sage, we can be curious, even in the midst of the crisis and the drama and all of the things, and not go down the rabbit hole of um, all of that with whoever we're, talking to or sitting in front of or whatever that is. And from a physical perspective, kind of going back to the body keeps the score. Out of here, we're just awash in cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and that is massively deteriorating our bodies.
mhm,
And so if we can get more adept at shifting to be up here, and if you can just shift into curiosity, that is
mhm.
a step in that direction.
Yeah, just the noticing, saying, "Oh, I'm thinking that thought again," can bring the neocortex back online, just a quick noticing.
Mhm.
Um, I also love to just always remind people of the breath, which is like our most powerful tool that we are given. just
Mhm.
doing a couple of belly breaths, deep belly breaths or diaphragmatic breathing, breathing all the way into the lungs, letting the diaphragm do its work. There's a lot of research and writing now on the vagus
Mhm.
nerve, which is kind of everywhere. So I'm sure you've
Right.
seen it, but the
Oh, for
vagus
him.
nerve puts us into this parasympathetic, not cortisol, rest, digest, heal, quieter state. And our nervous system needs that so bad in
Mhm.
our culture. We're just stuck
Mhm.
in the fight or flight too much. So
Mhm.
just some belly breathings. I mean, literally, I tell people at each red light, take 4 belly breaths, and
Mhm.
don't close
Mhm.
your eyes, even just let yourself know that you're safe in this moment right now
Mhm.
and let your body just settle a tiny bit. And those little steps, I think, are so powerful towards a longer lasting calm,
Mhm.
little baby
Mhm.
steps.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, one of the things that we talk about at Voices Encourage so much is the whole self-care component, which, a lot of people when they get into crisis, that's the first thing they drop. And it actually is the first thing they should ratchet up.
Hmm.
So, what do you do at this stage of the game? Because you have a very busy life and you're holding the space for a lot of different people, and including yourself. And so, what is it that you routinely do that keeps you in more sage and more centered and more calm, um, in peace?
Well, this is also a journey. So, I go on the teeter totter. Sometimes I'm doing better than others. And
Hmm.
with 3 kids and work and all the things, it's a challenge. But I try to do just little check ins. So I try to do my breathing, just connecting into my body, calming my body through my breath. I try to do that between each client I see
Hmm.
before I pick up the kids, just not a big long breath work, just some breathing, just to
Hmm.
bring myself like check in with myself. Hi, Robin. How are you in there?
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
I will
yeah.
put a hand on my heart, just to say, hi, I hear you. Sometimes I feel a lot of sorrow and I have to just check in with
Mm,
that and say, hi, I know, there's still some sorrow that is in there and I hear you.
mhm,
Just kind of a compassionate presence with myself, I would
mhm.
say. I think that's the main thing. I really have stopped the stories and the beating myself up, and that has really helped. I mean, the amount of suffering that's taken off of me, it's just
Yeah.
self care moment by moment by not beating myself
Mhm.
up.
Right.
And then I have work that I love, and I lead groups that I love, and I do the work with others, which is
Mhm,
doing the work for myself too. And I just kind of
mhm,
keep my toe in that. And then,
mhm.
like this weekend, I'm going away with my sister for a couple days, which is
Mm,
a big treat. I'll do bigger things like that. That's a big deal to get to go away and
mhm,
disconnect for a few days.
mhm,
But I would say the biggest thing is just constantly, regularly, not constantly, checking in with myself, breathing,
mhm,
noticing when I'm getting a little bit revved up and stressed and going out and putting my feet on the ground and just taking a few breaths or
mhm.
just pausing and checking in with myself. I think more than like go get a facial and go get, doing all these quote unquote
Sure.
self care things. I feel like the
Mhm,
self care for me is compassion with myself and others and just kind of more an, I don't know, a loving presence that
mhm,
stops the beating.
mhm, mhm. I love that loving presence piece and the stopping from beating yourself up. Because I think generally speaking, people are caught in the habit of that and pattern interrupting it, stopping it, observing it, being aware that that's in fact what you're doing, and that is to what end?
Mhm.
How does that serve you? Um, and so being gentle and kind with yourself is so important. Um, and obviously you tack on, please get great sleep at night, eat cleaner, exercise. I'm a big exerciser because I run at a pretty high energy and I need to kind of spin some of that off.
Mhm.
Um, and um, yeah, but the gentleness of what you spoke to is, I think, profound for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely agree. I like to just walk. That's my favorite form of exercise or hike, but research shows sleep 8 hours a night or so, is
Mhm.
huge for combating depression and other things and getting, a half hour at least of just a walk. You don't have to, you do whatever you want, whatever you enjoy. I
Mhm.
really believe exercise should be because it feels good, not
Mhm.
because you're again punishing yourself.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, eating whole foods, I like that you said that because very much I try to feed myself food that my grandmother would know was food, like a lot of our
Right.
rows, or they say shop the periphery. That's where
Yes.
you find the fresh stuff that's going to go
Mhm.
bad, and it's going to go bad because it's actually real food that your body recognizes.
Right, 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 right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and friends, I mean, social connection is
Mhm.
huge, and
Mhm.
over and over the research shows that longevity and health and all sorts of good
Mhm.
things that we want are
Mhm.
connected to social well-being. And so I have a lot
Mhm.
of friends in my network, and I try to really take time to make that a priority, and I play volleyball once a week because it's fun. Stuff like
Mhm.
that. It's just
Yeah.
little moments, little hours here and there.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm just going to make one little point is the friends that you hang out, make sure that they are life-giving instead of life-sucking.
Absolutely. Yes.
Mhm.
Trim the ones that are
Mhm.
exhausting when you leave, you
Mhm.
feel depleted. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I feel like I don't know, once you start putting out the energy of life giving and sort of holding yourself in higher regard, I feel
Mhm.
like you find the right people. Like
Yes.
we put out and we attract, and so I
Mhm.
feel like as long as, I don't know, we start loving ourselves a little better, then we find people that love us a bit better too.
Mhm. Most definitely. And they show up.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
because they're looking for us too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's so many, I mean, now because, social media and everything else, the good thing of that is that you can search groups that are
Mhm.
feeding you in some way or that are, you know, doing things you enjoy. Like there's hiking groups or there's all sorts of
Mhm.
meetup things that you can connect with. And so that's kind
Mhm.
of a fun thing. You don't have to
Mhm.
just wander the streets hoping someone in the grocery
Hoping
aisle
you're gonna
might be
run
your
into
next
somebody.
friend.
Oh, shoot,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, we met each other through a mutual friend who I was introduced through a mutual friend. The lineage kind of goes back at least, 3, 4 generations, so to speak,
Hmm.
for us to come together to have a meeting and for us to be on this podcast together. And so if you follow, the people that bring you life that you enjoy being around, that are your laughing tribe or, whatever, and ask them, who else do you know
Hmm.
that is part of our tribe, but I don't know them yet.
Hmm.
um
Yeah, and just following the joy moments, like what is it that sparks excitement or joy or
mhm,
makes you feel good and just following that. I feel like in our culture and in our American work your tail off, and then
mhm,
retire and die culture, we don't make enough space for just really enjoying and knowing that life is for enjoyment and pleasure and,
mhm,
following that. And I feel like we almost feel guilty if we're doing something that's fun or pleasurable
mhm.
because we're not working hard enough. But
Right.
believe me, we're all working hard enough. And if you think,
Mhm.
I don't remember who said it, but if you think you're working, that you need to work harder, what you really need is help. Like, and if it's
Yeah.
like
Right.
we're just
Right.
all very skewed on that.
Yes. And we have enough people like the Steve Jobs, commencement speech, and people who have been on the edge of passing, looking at their life in retrospect and wishing that they had had the wisdom that they had in that moment, and
Hmm.
leaving it for us to hear or read or whatever, is that when we get to the end of our lives, all this busyness and all these things and all the quote things we think are success, like melt away really quick.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the connections and the moments,
Hmm.
the little moments.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So if you could give somebody who's in crisis right now, whether they're dealing with a spouse or a child, whether it's adult child or a friend that they love, what is kind of one of those 1, 2, or 3 things that you would encourage them to think about?
I mean, the first thing I would say is it's not your fault, no matter what it is. You didn't create it, even if it's your child or even if it's your spouse,
Mhm,
um, or even if it's yourself. It's not your fault, and you can kind of give yourself a little bit of grace around that.
mhm,
It's also in the same vein, not yours to fix someone else. We just
mhm,
can't. And
mhm,
so giving yourself permission to check in with yourself as to what do you need, what space do you need, what do you need to feel well? Because I
mhm,
really believe, it's been said a million times now, it's so cliche, but like put on your own oxygen mask before you help
mhm,
another, right? Like we have to be well in
mhm,
order to be of use to others. And so just checking in with yourself and giving yourself permission to have your own needs that don't always revolve around someone else's crisis or someone else's needs. And
mhm,
then just, I mean, gentle. Like I keep saying that, but I just do strongly believe that we need to be gentle with ourselves because
mhm,
when someone else is in crisis, it affects us and we're in crisis too. And there's really, even if you disconnect, it does affect us. And so
mhm,
saying, well, that's okay. And I'm doing my work and I'm asking myself what I need and I'm surrendering and I'm saying, I don't have control.
mhm,
And yet it's still hard. Right. And
mhm.
that's okay. Like
Right.
just keep being kind to yourself and find your
Mhm,
people that can hold you up and love you
mhm.
through it. um, Reach out. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Great. I love all 3 of those.
Was that three?
Super
I don't know.
wise.
Uh,
So as we
yeah.
wrap up here, if people wanted to get a hold of you, how could they?
So I have a website, robindetmer.com, and that's sort of my physical therapy and wellness and energetics and all that website. The open book memoir.com is for our book, and we're the open book. Um, it's called The Open Book, a family memoir of adventure, trauma, and resilience. That's available on Amazon or in Tsunami if you live in town in Eugene. Um, and we have a website for that. Um, I'm on Instagram at Robin Detmer, and my cell phone number is on my website because that's how people directly schedule with me
Find
at the
you. Yeah,
moment. Since
right. Yeah.
COVID, I don't have online scheduling because it got too confusing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and you can email me through that website too. So I'd say go to my website. You can also just find me on Google. If you search Robin Detmer, you will, or Robin Detmer MPT, which is Master of Physical Therapy, you will find me because there's all
Mhm.
the things, it keeps track of you pretty well on the internet now.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yes, it does. I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, I would encourage people to reach out to her. Obviously, you can see she is delightful and full of wisdom and still gaining wisdom and open. Her
Yes.
heart is open wide now. And so, yeah, we're all on this incredible journey. And I'm so grateful that our paths have crossed and that
Yes,
you
me
created
too.
the time for this today.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me on your show. It's great.
Mhm.
I'm excited you're doing this. This is really important work.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Until
Okay.
next time, everybody, please take care of yourselves.
Yes, be gentle.
Mhm.
Thank you for joining us in this episode. We hope this discussion gives you the empowerment you need during these challenging times. Remember, there is always light after darkness. For more inspiring conversations like this one, subscribe to the show at voicesencourage.com/podcast. We encourage you to share with your friends and family going through similar situations so we can continue to build a strong community of hope and possibility. Start your life-changing journey today. Join our community at voicesencourage.com.